Untangle Your Anxiety, Chapter 2. What is anxiety? Featured illustrator at katies.self.care.diaries. Let's strip it right to the bone and ask the question, what is anxiety? Anxiety is a feeling of unease that includes emotions such as worry or fear. Anxiety can be measured on a spectrum that can be anything from feeling slightly nervous to struggling with acute panic. Every human on the planet has feeling of anxiety at some point in their life, and there are lots of common examples of anxiety, such as worrying about sitting an exam, worrying about test results, worrying about the upcoming job interview, nervous about a first date, general worries about your relationship, and worrying about the future. During times like these, feeling anxious can feel completely normal. Nerves are known to help us focus and perform better, or to help us problem solve. Try and consider how you felt before an interview or a driving test. We can all feel the effects of anxiety, but we don't really worry about why we are anxious. We're just anxious because we care about the outcome. It is okay to feel anxious in anticipation of something that we are about, and it can actually be performance enhancing for many of us. Anxiety is an intense and induced response to things that may make us fearful. Normally, the brain monitors our fear and anxiety without allowing it to interrupt our daily lives. Our brains are automatically scanning the area around us, and if there is a nearby threat, our brains will respond by increasing our anxiety and fear accordingly. For some people, this area of the brain functions more than it should do. This being a form of excessive anxiety can be overwhelming, and that interferes with daily life. The person will experience many symptoms and may start to develop many irrational behaviors. Anxiety that persists and lasts for a long time, like this, may be classified as an anxiety disorder. When does anxiety become a problem then? Anxiety becomes problematic when it becomes excessive, or in psychology terms, disordered. Anxiety can creep into our lives and cause huge disorder, disrupting our normal lives, behaviors, and routines. Feeling of anxiety can become very acute, and suddenly we can become concerned about an array of symptoms associated with how we feel. Disordered anxiety occurs when we stop worrying about issues in the external world and focus all of our attention to our internal world, this world within us consisting of 3 parts. 1. Feelings. With excessive anxiety, we can often experience feelings of doom or dread and feel like a heavy cloud over our existence. We can feel very on edge, scared, and on occasions terrified. We may feel like we are not in our own bodies, as if we are observing ourselves as exist in an alternative reality. Alongside feelings of fear, we may also feel down, helpless, and notice a lingering sadness. Furthermore, we may also experience feeling of frustration, anger, and irritability. 2. Thoughts. Anxiety comes with a boatload of thoughts that can often rush into the minds faster than we can comprehend them. What's interesting, though, is that you are distinguished between a normal thought and an anxious thought by how each thought begins. Almost every anxious thought begins with a what if, followed by a scary and catastrophic content derived from our imaginations. Anxious thoughts follow this simple formula. What if happens? Some of the most common what ifs we hear. What if I have another panic attack? What if I never feel normal again? What if I am broken? What if I'm freaking out or going crazy? What if they are judging me? What if I have a heart attack? What if I can't sustain this feeling and it eventually hurts me? What ifs are just thoughts. However, when you combine them with feelings and sensations, they suddenly seem more real. Anxiety's best and only trick. Number 3, sensations. On top of the feeling and thoughts, anxiety comes with a multitude of physical symptoms and sensations. There are so many. Some of the most common sensations associated with anxiety are feeling of detachment from reality, a pounding heart, tight chest, headaches, or a tight band feeling around the head, nauseous symptoms similar to irritable bowel syndrome, sweating, shaking, a sensitivity to light, muscle tension all over the body, chest flutters, and a heart skipping a beat, torso pains, muscle twitching, jaw tension, and bloating, just to name a few. We are no stranger to these symptoms ourselves and have suffered with many of the examples from all three parts of the anxiety. We recommend taking time to write down the different facets of your anxiety just to help you contemplate what is happening with you. How common is anxiety? Anxiety is very common. Despite most people struggling with it, feeling isolated and somehow different to people around them, anxiety disorders affect around 18% of the population in the U.S. every year, which means around 1 in 5 people will at some point struggle with anxiety in some way, namely a combination of the thoughts, feelings, and sensations mentioned before. If there are 20 of you in a room, then 4 of you will experience disordered anxiety at some point in your life. In the UK, where we are from, 6.6 of the people will be experiencing some sort of disordered anxiety in a given week. There is no definitive answer as to why anxiety has increased over the years. Many researchers believe that it is common for many factors that have contributed to the increase, including the impact of social media on self-esteem and how we value ourselves, poor sleeping habits, lowered stigma under reporting it in the past. Perhaps it has always been there, but we are all just suffering in silence. The DLC Anxiety platform was born on Instagram. Dean is so happy to have been able to create a worldwide platform that's shining the brightest light on anxiety and panic disorder and using social media for its purpose to spread awareness and connect people together under one umbrella, trying to ensure nobody ever feels that they are alone. Fortunately, the platform has enabled many people to come together and share their experiences. It surprised us, the sheer amount of people that can relate to feeling anxious. It is amazing to see such influential people on social media using their platforms to create mental health awareness. Pop stars such as Madison Beer, who has a huge following, regularly posts psychoeducational posts and speaks out about her own mental health and urges her fans to speak out and seek help for their own. Along with being an actor, comedian, podcast host, the super talented Brittany Furlan Lee regularly urges people to speak about their own mental health and if they are struggling to seek help. Brittany also gives her followers an insight into her own life, often telling followers when she is feeling anxious or has just had a panic attack. We also love the interview with Alicia Cara that we host on the platform, as well as the ones from Jude Moore, Lily Cornell Silver, and many others. The interviews demonstrated that anxiety can affect all of us from all walks of life. Anxiety versus disorder. Anxiety is a term that gets bandied around a lot, much to the displeasure of people who are crippled by it. It can often be referred to as an exaggerated term for something that was only mildly anxiety-provoking. For example, a person playfully startles a friend and the friend responds with, "Oh my God, you gave me a panic attack." Furthermore, diagnostic labels are loosely given to normal character traits, such as labeling someone who likes to be organized as, "Wow, he is so OCD." People who experience actual panic attacks or suffer with obsessive-compulsive disorder will tell you that it is nothing to joke about. We found, when discussing the writing of this book, that it is incredibly important to distinguish between everyday anxiety and disorder anxiety. Anxiety and anxiety disorders often get confused, and it is the confusion that can continue to fuel the false narrative that anxiety is just something we all deal with, and that those who openly speak about anxiety are somehow weak or attention-seeking. This couldn't be further from the truth, because having an anxiety disorder and facing anxiety each day takes strength and courage. It is important to note that anxiety has an emotion and a biological response. It is a healthy phenomenon that we all experience. We'll discuss this more in depth later. However, with anxiety However, when anxiety becomes excessive, overwhelming, chronic, and debilitating, it can start to affect our day-to-day life. This is when anxiety creeps into disorder territory. An anxiety disorder happens when anxiety becomes overwhelming or appears unexpectedly. Anxiety disorders are a mental condition that we can have a huge impact on your day-to-day life. To reiterate, anxiety is a natural response that we all have from time to time, and in the right situation, anxiety can be useful. For example, just before an exam, a person may get anxious. However, the type of anxiety can help you keep you focused. A sports person feels the adrenaline before a big match. A spokesperson rouses themselves up for a convincing pitch. Nerves during a musical performance help us to unlock a higher level of performance. However, someone who is diagnosed with an anxiety disorder can ruminate over the exam weeks before. It may consume their minds on a daily basis, causing physical and emotional symptoms. Right before and during the exam, they will experience intense symptoms of anxiety. Anxiety is fleeting, whereas an anxiety disorder is constant and can occur over a period of weeks, months, or even years. Dean. A doctor or a psychologist can diagnose an anxiety disorder, or many people can seem to self-diagnose. Either way, it is always helpful to acknowledge an anxiety problem, and we have written this book to help you as much as we can. Common pitfalls of anxiety. 1. Trying to fix anxiety. One of the biggest mistakes people make is assuming they're broken or that something is wrong with them. The anxious response is a healthy, normal response. However, when it becomes excessive or disordered, many people jump to the conclusion that something has broken them in some way or that they need fixing. The person who is dealing with anxiety will often try and find solutions to fix the situations. As humans, we have a tendency to want to fix something if we are unable to manage it successfully. The problem with trying to fix anxiety is that you are not broken in the first place. Highlighting that there's a problem that needs to be fixed is equivalent to shining a big, bright spotlight on the anxiety we may be feeling. In turn, this means we are giving the anxiety more attention and feeling the constant loop of anxious thoughts and behaviors. Anxiety occurs in response to a perceived or actual threat. Our minds can't process the difference between perceived and real, and will react in the same way. People who fall into this category will often have shelves full of self-help books, saved documents of reassurance from social media and non-fiction outlets, and will often avoid doing things until I feel better. 2. Avoidance. Avoidance is one of the main reasons why you can remain in an anxious cycle. As soon as we start avoiding things, the brain notices that we start behaving unusually and gets trickled into thinking something is wrong. People with anxiety begin to avoid places or people for fear of triggering their anxious response or believing that they will pass out or have a heart attack or go crazy, etc. I honestly spent a month in my bedroom waiting for the feelings to pass. What I didn't realize is that this was not helping. Once I realized that avoiding doing this was only contributing to the anxiety and that anxiety itself was dangerous, I started to reintroduce my old life back. Josh. An example of this would be if someone had a panic disorder and their trigger is a shopping mall, then every time they go and do their grocery shopping, they get to intense anxiety, which often leads to panic attacks. They may start to change their behavior to try to reduce the anxiety they are feeling. This may start with going to the mall at quieter times or limiting the time they are in the shop. Initially, they may find some short-term relief for intense anxiety, but what this behavior is doing is conditioning the mind to think that every time they go to the shopping mall, they may be in danger. What you tend to find is that the anxiety will start to get more intense. This can then lead to further behaviors such as changing shopping habits altogether and shopping online. Again, this may give some temporary relief to the person, but this learned behavior is conditioning the mind to think that shopping malls are now a threat. This can then progress to the mind thinking that every time the person leaves their home, they are under the threat. So anxiety may start to pop up when the person is outside. This can have a huge impact on someone's life and can lead to agoraphobia, which is the fear of being in situations where escape may be difficult or help may not be available if something was to go wrong. 3. Google searching. Another common pitfall that we hear often and can relate to is the dreaded Google search, Googling symptoms and believing the ever so insightful Dr. Google. In a world dominated by technology, it's just so easy to reach for your phone and type in whatever symptom you may have been bothering you that day. The only problem is that Google is not programmed to give you the most likely medical cause of your symptom you have searched. It is programmed to give you the most searched or talked about conditions, so you will see conditions such as cancer, heart problems, neurological disorders, tumors, etc. What does this do for an anxious mind? Cue the rabbit hole. An anxious mind will zone in on the worst case scenario, dismissing all other likely causes and look for further evidence that what they have is a self-threatening illness. This can consume someone's daily life with constant worry and what-if thoughts. This common pitfall is also a symptom of health anxiety. 4. The miracle thought and trying to work out anxiety. A big pitfall that people fall into is trying to intellectualize the problem by trying to work out their anxiety by exploring their thoughts and ruminating on the possibility that we can work it out, how we feel by thinking our way out of it. In Josh's practice, he calls this Inception Thinking, a reference to the Hollywood film that has multiple dream levels and a convoluted plot that has baffled a lot of people. In reality, we aren't searching the deeper levels of our minds for an answer, though. We're simply contributing to an anxious cycle and subscribing to a false belief that we are broken in some way. 5. Reliance on others. Do you feel scared to be left on your own? Scared that you might get anxious and not have anyone there for you to rely on? If your answer to this question is yes, then you are not alone. Reliance or codependency is a common pitfall that we see with anxious people. Reliance to have someone there just in case you get anxious, or the fear of being left alone when you might go crazy, are statements that we have heard a lot and thoughts we have had over the years. What you will find as you continue to read is that anxiety may have different disguises, but it always has the same result when it happens. If we show you too much attention, it will speak, but then it always goes away. Rest assured, we are never in a constant state of fixed anxiety. It's not biologically possible. If we become reliant on people, then when we are alone, we start to become more anxious. What we are doing is training the brain to think that when we are alone, we must be in some sense of danger. With this perceived threat, our body will do what it is supposed to do and increase our anxiety levels. Unfortunately, this can develop into even further avoidance and an anxious cycle. We only have to imagine being left alone, and we may feel our anxiety starting to rise. 6. We ask others. We asked the DLC platform what common pitfalls they have experienced when trying to manage anxiety, and here's what they said. Can you relate to any of these? Substance abuse. I used to drink heavily when I was feeling anxious, and it sort of helped at the time because it numbed my mind, but what I found was that when I woke up the next day, I would have the worst anxiety, and this would be an ongoing cycle of increased anxiety. Pushing myself to do something I didn't want to do, all just in case it reduces anxiety, which it never does. I now know this is called white knuckling. Trying to become anxiety-free, you hear so many books and people state that you can live anxiety-free. I have been worried about the virus and falling victim to being consumed by the news, which I know is only fueling anxiety further. I used to always get thoughts that would pop into my mind and stick there. I always tried not to think something when I did this is just made the anxiety worse. Deep breathing and concentrating on my breath when I have a panic attack. The first thing that changes is my breathing. I used to always try to overcome this and do all the textbook breathing exercises only to find out it would make more anxiety worse. Some examples that Josh has heard from his readers and clients from the panic room with permission are: I've tried yoga and meditation for my anxiety and it didn't help. I've cut out all unhealthy foods and even cut out gluten in the hope that it would make me feel better. I've tried the holistic approach to anxiety. I've sampled every essential oil, herbal remedy, specialty, and even tried Reiki and Gong Bass to try and help my anxiety. I exercise twice a day, but it still doesn't shift how I feel. Interestingly, all these approaches subscribe to the narrative that we need to fix or do something when we are anxious. In the following chapter, we will explain why we do this, and as well as the important questions of why we get anxious and what anxiety actually is. In conversation, Josh: I had it in work, which was a place I was very comfortable in, when suddenly, whoosh, oh my gosh. I started to become really scared after mine, though. What about you? Dean: I did. So I was in the center of the shopping center, and all the what-if thoughts were just telling me, what if I am in immediate danger? You need to get out of the shopping center. So I almost ran out of the shopping center and back to my car, knowing that it was like a safe place for me, if you know what I mean. Josh: so you weren't worrying about your dodgy dress sense? Dean: I wasn't, no, not on this occasion. Laughter. But yeah, as anxiety does, it reached a peak, and then by the time I got to my car, I felt the anxiety start to increase. But that was my first real panic attack, and that's what really kick-started the panic disorder. Josh: it's interesting because for me, it's always the word misinterpretation that applies. I misinterpreted my initial anxiety. I spent months at home trying to work out my anxiety, and I was just keeping this anxious threat response on all the time, getting scary what-ifs, scary sensations, and just kind of regressing it into a bit of a depression as well, because it was affecting my life. Yeah, scary when I don't know what about you. But I just didn't know who to turn to at the time. No one got it. It's really strange trying to say to someone, yeah, I don't kind of feel like I'm here. I feel petrified for no reason and having weird thoughts of and sensations because they just look at you like, what? Dean: exactly. And that's a really good point saying that. Really, when you first experience it, and from myself and speaking to other people who've gone through anxiety disorders, when you first experience it, you really don't know who to turn to. And I remember I was even scared to go to the doctors because I had my mind that this must be something serious. This must be something that's seriously wrong with me. And the anxiety was a feeling that I didn't want to find out more about.